All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're decoding a truly terrifying nightmare to uncover the hidden, clinical language of the mind. We are going to peel back the layers of a fascinating and deeply disturbing dream diary to see exactly how our brains process extreme stress, trauma, and complex family dynamics while we are fast asleep. Imagine waking up, and you aren't just a little startled. You are absolutely furious. You're muttering, "Don't mess with me," and the intense rage from your dream is literally spilling over into your reality. Well, this gripping vision of being locked inside a metal flask is exactly where our psychological detective story begins. It tells us right away that we're not dealing with random, meaningless sleep imagery here. We're looking at a profound, unresolved psychological conflict that is actively threatening the dreamer's ego. First up, let's look at the structure of this nightmare and trace the psychological descent. If we map out the dreamer's journey, we see a progression from mild frustration all the way to ultimate psychological regression and confinement. It starts off in a familiar, everyday setting, a park near their childhood home, but then it progressively deteriorates into foreign landscapes, oppressive institutions, and finally, total physical restriction. It is a textbook visual representation of a mind completely losing its grip on autonomy. The dream actually kicks off with the dreamer digging up rocks that instantly deflate when touched. This brilliantly illustrates a mind realizing its own coping mechanisms are completely hollow. In Jungian psychology, digging into the earth represents exploring the unconscious. Finding something that looks like a solid rock, which usually symbolizes unchangeable value or a strong defense, only to touch it and realize it's just a useless balloon, that perfectly captures the dreamer's waking reality. Their expected solutions and emotional armor are in fact incredibly fragile. Moving into part 2, we had a very dark theme, repressing the inner child and the silenced infant. As the dream progresses, we shift from the park to a domestic scene, and things take an oppressive turn involving a newborn baby. The dreamer's sister leaves her newborn with the dreamer and their mother, setting the stage for a traumatic projection of guilt and control. Now, before we get into what happens to the baby, we have to understand that this infant represents the dreamer's own fragile inner child. This isn't just some random baby. Clinically, it's the projection of the dreamer's most vulnerable, authentic self, the part of them that desperately needs safety and unconditional care.
So, picture this. The baby falls ill, and suddenly, angry nurses invade the home. They wrap the infant in nylon bags and tightly buckle it down to this operating table-like bed, scolding the family for not acting sooner. The dreamer desperately wants to argue back, but then he looks at his mother. Now, in reality, his mother actually has a medical background, but in the dream, she just watches in agonizing silence. Seeing her do nothing, the dreamer decides he must suppress his own voice and stay silent too.
The crucial point to grasp here is that this medical abuse has absolutely nothing to do with healthcare. It's a projection of how the dreamer feels suffocated and silenced by strict social rules and authority. The nurses represent an overly strict superego or intense societal pressure. And the fact that the dreamer stays quiet simply because his mother does, that shows a deeply learned behavior, completely suppressing your own voice and natural vitality in the face of maternal authority. That brings us to part 3, hospital and maternal betrayal, set at the bizarre Tsumatsuma clinic. At this shady clinic, a doctor mocks the dreamer about a past sexual experience, which showcases immense shame and a fear of losing parental approval. But the suspense absolutely peaks when they leave. The dreamer tries to suggest they just grab a drink and relax, seeking a normal adult connection with his mom. Instead of offering comfort, the mother frantically evades him. She literally sprints away and zigzags into a pitch-black Tokyo, actively trying to lose her own son in the dark. When he finally catches up, she calmly just hands him over to a foreign handler in a muddy, ruined landscape. To decode this ultimate betrayal, we have to apply the Jungian concept of the Great Mother, which reveals the terrifying, devouring side of maternal influence. In this dream, the nurturing aspect of the mother completely vanishes. Selling him out to a grim overseas facility, it represents psychological abandonment and emotional rejection. It is the ultimate betrayal of the autonomous self by the exact person who is supposed to offer foundational protection. Part 4 takes us into pink confinement and regression, illustrating a highly distorted family dynamic. Stranded in this developing nation, the psychological landscape has shifted from a familiar city to an impoverished, muddy wasteland, symbolizing a total depletion of the dreamer's mental energy. He's locked inside a ruined 6-story pink building. Now, pink is usually associated with maternal love, but here it's rotting and decayed. He's completely cut off from the outside world with a 4-year sentence. The bizarre 100-centimeter tall adult handler represents a distorted maternal figure. And his missing smartphone? That symbolizes a complete severing of his independent identity and his connection to reality.
And it gets worse. He's told that a tiny hamster is his equal roommate. The dreamer sarcastically says, "So I'm in here with a rat." It's a heartbreaking projection of how tiny, powerless, and trapped his subconscious feels at this point. He is essentially forced to view himself as nothing more than a helpless rodent in a cage.
Which leads us to part 5, pathology and destructive catharsis, where the family pathology is fully revealed.
Stripped of his phone and his dignity, the dreamer finally snaps. He unleashes a massive verbal and physical explosion of repressed rage against his mother and his captors. He screams at his mom that she intentionally made her 4 children sick by wrapping them in aluminum and forcing them to swallow it, essentially calling her a murderer. Clinically speaking, aluminum is a powerful symbol here. It represents a shiny but cold, lifeless barrier. It symbolizes a toxic double bind, receiving what looks like nourishment from a parent, but it actually suffocates your individuality and emotional life. Following that verbal outburst, the dream just explodes into full-on anime-style violence. The dreamer suddenly possesses this martial arts mastery, taking out crowds of patients with Dragon Ball-style speed and power. He breaks out into a ruined, post-war European stone plaza, but people are fleeing from him as if a natural disaster just struck. He spots old classmates and begs them to play with him again, screaming that he did nothing wrong, but they just look at him in absolute terror and run away. You might think this godlike strength is a victory. Actually, scratch that. It's a desperate defense mechanism known as hypercompensation. That helpless infant who is strapped down at the beginning of the dream is reacting to ultimate powerlessness by fantasizing about absolute destructive control. But the result isn't freedom, is it? It's terrifying isolation. His aggressive defense mechanisms drive away the exact social connections and friendships he craves so deeply. Finally, overwhelmed by military force, the dreamer is subdued, leading to a chilling out-of-body climax. The military treats him like a movie villain and takes him down. Notice the shift in perspective here. He watches himself from the outside. This is textbook clinical dissociation. The ego is so incredibly overwhelmed by the trauma of defeat that it completely detaches from the physical body just to survive the final blow. And in a dark twist of irony, the very aluminum he accused his mother of using becomes his literal suffocating prison. He is shoved into a retro aluminum camping canteen, buckled and locked in for over 10 years. It's this grotesque parody of returning to the womb, but instead of a warm, nurturing space, it's a cold, dead, metallic coffin. It represents ultimate passivity, psychological suffocation, and a total collapse of the self. So how do we fix this? Let's move to part 6, the path to psychological integration and healing the trauma. Leaving the sheer terror of the dream behind, we can pivot to a truly empowering clinical action plan. Because as horrific as this dream is, it's actually a massive warning siren from the subconscious, showing the dreamer exactly what needs fixing in the waking world. First, they have to unlearn that agonizing silence from when the baby was strapped down. They have to stop being the compliant good boy. Second, they need to learn to say no healthfully, setting nonviolent boundaries with their family without resorting to that destructive anime-style rage. Third, and this is fascinating, therapists suggest reframing that final terrifying aluminum bag. What if instead of a prison, it's viewed as a temporary, indestructible shell protecting the dreamer while they heal? And finally, of course, engaging with professional help is absolutely crucial to safely untangle these intense symbols. It really makes you wonder about the hidden messages inside your own mind, doesn't it? Our subconscious is constantly trying to communicate with us, and it often uses the most dramatic, surreal, and sometimes terrifying imagery possible just to make us pay attention. So the next time you wake up with a lingering emotion from a bizarre dream, take a moment to decode it. You might just find the exact roadmap you need for your own growth. Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep questioning what lies beneath.